Hello, hello. Welcome back. Welcome back, everybody, to History 1301. It's part 2 of chapter 1. Really important chapter. That's why I'm taking so long on this. A lot of things that Eric Fonner, the textbook, doesn't get right, or gets right, but doesn't really explore much. So I'm giving you a whole lot more information that I think is pretty useful, and moreover, I think it's pretty fun to go over. So you have to stick around. Grab some popcorn, grab a beer, some wine. Do yourself a favor and enjoy this as much as you can. I'll try to make it as fun as I can. Alright, anyways, let's continue going. I left off basically with the burgeoning, right? The rise of these really, really great civilizations prior to European contact here in the New World. So I want to bring your attention to that, the New World. That's the name of the chapter, right? Chapter 1, A New World. Right, and I don't know if you noticed, right? Basically, what I just talked about here, right? That was not known, right? Olmecs, right? Cahokians, the Anasazis, the Sunnis, right? Europeans, they have no fucking clue about this in this time period, right? Before Columbus hits, right? There's that one thing, right, going on. Right, there's all these. Basically, there's really good in North America, right? Alone, all these different kinds of ethno-linguistic groups, we can call them. Right? So not everybody speaks the same language or does the same things, right? There's so many variations already. So it was a long, long history, complex history of civilizations here. Right? So there's a big, big history here. So it's really odd. All this, the new world. There's nothing new about this, right? First part of my first lecture was the Paleo Indians, first inhabitants of the continent that we know as America now. And the name America too, right? Gotta question that, dude, right? So question everything, right? That you get. It's a good thing to good practice for not just this class, but for the rest of your life. Just question everything. The Paleo Indians, right? The first inhabitants. Right? They've been here for a long time. Shit, at least 14,000 years ago. And then we have this rise of these beautiful, complex societies, empires, throughout, up and down the American continent. So what's new about this world, right? So this is just, again, history is interpretation. Right? This is just a viewpoint of Europeans. Again, the Europeans had no fucking clue about all these stuff. But when they first read about Columbus's exploits over here in the New World, right, Mundo Novo, they're like, holy shit, man. Everything was new, right? This was literally was a new world for these people, for the Europeans. And that stuck around, right? This is the way we kind of separate the old world with the new world, right? But think about how, there's flawed in there, right? It's just basically what I'm trying to point out here is how Eurocentric history has been thus far. Right? It still, unfortunately, continues to be, as the name of this chapter really exemplifies, right? I know Dr. Fonner knows well, right? He's a fucking bright man. Right? Regardless of his politics, he's a super bright man. He knows it's not the new world, right? But I think maybe he was just using that to highlight, right, this Eurocentricity, right, the Eurocentrism of the way we explain things, right? I want to point out to you right now to a book. I'll be doing this constantly, right? This is a benefit of watching my lectures here, that you'll get a little bit of extra information, suggested readings if you're really into this particular theme or topic I'm talking about. And here it's called The Myth of Consonants. It's called The Critique of Meta-Geography by Martin Lewis and Karen Wigan. It's a really fantastic book that really challenges, right, and questions, right, critiques. The critique is taken for granted the presupposed notion of map making of for example, not just the New World as this flawed category we're gonna name, right, that gives you a Eurocentric perspective, presupposes a Eurocentric perspective, but names like the Middle East, right, or the Far East, or the West, or the East, right, South, North, right? The world is a globe, It's a sphere. Why does it have to be this, right? Why is it always South America and North America, right? If we're out there in space just floating, where is the middle? Where's the center? When we talk about far east to what? What's the center then here? Right? Obviously, the center, right? It's going to be Europe again, right? Eurocentrism. And everything, the whole world revolves around Europe, and that is the view that these people had with them when they came into contact with this new world. So just keep that in mind, and you want to explore that issue, right? Of the power, really, of map making. Check out this book. It's a really, really cool book. Strongly recommend it. All right, good. I kind of carried away there, but anyways, so let's go back to like the content, right? So I left off with the rise of these badass civilizations. And my emphasis there was to show you that we had a long history of complex technological advancements here, way before the Europeans came into contact with us. Right? Different, right? We didn't have, for example, gunpowder, guns over here. We got guns and weapons. That wasn't gunpowder. Differences like that, right? Nonetheless, though, it was still a very complex civilization, very bright people as well. Which also, I mean, I need to allude here to this idea of, what do I call it? Land. I mean, land basically. Right? Land is going to be the most basic, I guess, pivot point or critical juncture. Let's call it that. This is the land. The issue of land ownership is going to be like the most critical juncture from now on up to this very present day. The issue all surrounds about land ownership and who owns. And there's very different conceptions between what the Native Americans here in the New World believe what land ownership was and what land and property was the Eurocentric, the European perspective, right? And this came to a clash, right, in the 1500s. So Indian attitudes, right, Native American attitudes towards land, there was no private property, basically, right? There was, basically what would happen is that, and this is an overgeneralization versus of this, like, this is what would happen, right? You have a chief, right, or the main dude, or woman, sometimes, and they would allocate certain land plots to certain families or clans, and that was like theirs. But there wasn't like really, they didn't own it individually, right? It was still part of the bigger tribe or nation, right? You just had permission to use that land for your own personal, immediate clan or family. And there was, I mean, but most of it was communal land holdings. The community, all the community members laid a claim to the land, right? It was just kind of organized different matters, for different families and clans. Right? Nobody had like a title to it. This is my fucking land. I'm gonna sell it, right, to somebody else, right? No, it wasn't like that at all. If that was not a thing to them, right? Totally alien to them. So they saw it more as a common root, not as a commodity, as it was in England. And keep in mind that England wasn't always like that, right? England also had a commons, we call it the commons, right? But there was this thing called the Enclosure Movement, and in England, basically the Enclosure Movement was these commons areas where people would just go there and pick wood, right, for their kitchens at home, or whatever, right? Became more enclosed, like fences, and parceled out private land holdings. So now, where your family used to always go and pick for your stove and for wintertime and for whatever to survive, now you were trespassing. You were a criminal. This is the Enclosure Movement. Right? This is one of the movements, one of the reasons why a lot of Europeans began migrating across the fucking Atlantic. It was a very dangerous endeavor back then, and expensive. It was because there was no more land. Land was becoming very, very rare come by, especially the common land in England, right, in Europe in this time period. So you have this, right, this movement happening here, and that movement didn't never happen until Europeans came and brought it over. The idea of private. All right. I mean, certainly there was material wealth, right, for Indians. Don't think that it was all fucking kumbaya and shit. No, there was warfare, slave raiding for sure, right? There was slavery in Native American societies, but it wasn't about like commodified, right? It wasn't a commodity. It was more about like stats, right? So if you're a badass warrior, right, of course you were more on the top echelon of society because you had more horses you won after you were victorious after the war. If you're a shitty warrior, you're not gonna have that many horses. You might even get killed, unless your family is gonna suffer and be poor. So you had like social stratification, right? This is complex civilization. It wasn't all egalitarian. So there's also a myth, right, that Native Americans were before the Europeans. It was all peaceful. No. It was they were humans, right? So there was differences in societies, right? The chiefs were obviously more top of the society. The priests or the shamans, right? Also the warriors, right? The producers, right? There was social stratification, right? Sure. There was inequality. Right? Not everybody was equal, but there was it wasn't commodified, right? Just keep that in mind. I want to go into like the whole theory of commodities and economy here because that's way beyond the purview of this class, but it was a different way of seeing how land is owned and used. All right. Gender relations as well, right? Very different, very starkly different from European conceptions. Gender relations from Native Americans. So Native Americans, right? They were mostly matrilineal. It meant that it was you follow your ancestry, and pretty much like the power wasn't the mother, right? The mother's side of the family. You marry into your mother's side of the family, right? Not the opposite that it is now. Right? So when women marry today, they usually take up their husband's last name. Flip that around, right? And that was the Native American way of life. Right? It was matrilineal. And again, that kind of alludes to the importance of their religious. Religion was not separated from their everyday way of life. Right? They didn't really have really a word for religion. It was just the way you do things, is the way of life, right? You ask for permission from Mother Earth and Father Sky, and, Tukashila, or whatever, right? We were Lakota, right? Tukashila, help me. Right? So, very, very vastly different ways of operating and organizing survival, basically. This all came to a clash in the 1500s. All right. Freedom, right? The idea of freedom, too, right? Vastly different. There was this thing called Indian freedom back then. The Europeans called it. Right? And the Europeans were like, this Indian freedom is savage. But it's just pure natural freedom. They have no norms to control they're always naked. Right? They're savages, right? They're always killing, whatever. Right? And that was like way too much freedom for Europeans, right? European freedoms was more like based upon like this Christian liberty. Where you're free unto God. You're free to follow God's commands. That's as free as you. You're not totally free like the Indians are. That's savagery. That's not civilized. You gotta be free to follow the rule of God and stuff. That's liberty, right? That's using your rationality to become. I don't know. It's totally different conceptions of liberty, right? They were, in other words, the Indians were way too free. They didn't have. I mean, obviously, they did have governments. Right? They had consuls and stuff. The Europeans' eyes, they were like, they didn't have governments, they didn't have fixed laws, right? They didn't have Christ in their lives. People named Jesus. Right? Basically, what's going on here? So two very different worldviews, and it all comes clashing, right? So let's go there. Let's go to the clash, right? But wait, actually, why the fuck did Europeans come here, right? Why the fuck did Europeans come to the New World? I think that'd be a better place to pick up, right? Instead of just going straight to the clash. Right? To kind of the history class, where we need context, right? So why did Europeans come here? Right? Why are Indians called Indians, right? That will help you explain that to answer that first question I just posed, right? Because we're trying to get towards India and towards China, right? At this point in time, right, the 1200s per se, let's use that arbitrarily, 1200s all the way to about 1500s, Europe was a back country. Europe was poor as shit. Yeah, there were your kings and your feudalisms and stuff like that, but it was poor as fuck as compared, relatively speaking, to like the Hindu civilizations, to the Chinese civilizations, dynasties out there. Big, massive money. That was the center of the world basically back then. Because what? They had spices, they had everything that the Europeans wanted. Right? And it wasn't the other way around. There was nothing, really. Absolutely, besides guns, actually. There's a caveat there. Besides guns, and there was absolutely nothing. There was really nothing that the people from India, or from Calicut, India, right, one of the big empires over there, of the Mughal Empire, of the Han Dynasty. There was nothing that these people wanted from the Europeans. The Europeans were seen as backwards and uncivilized, to use the lack of barbarians. Right? They were the barbarians, right? Point to you. This is our primary source. Well, not the book itself, right? But it's a collection of sources, primary sources. And this is, let me see. This is a journal entry, like a diary entry from some kind of like captain or some kind of like another crew member of Vasco de Gama. Vasco da Gama is one of the first Europeans to go around from Portugal. So the Portuguese were the first ones to go out and explore the rest of the world because they got their technology from the Chinese. So before the Portuguese, the Chinese, under this colonel, this admiral, Navy admiral, Zheng, it's spelled Chenghe. Zheng He, a big ass fucking navy, huge, man. And I wish I had the fucking picture of this. The comparison between a Portuguese caravel, which is like their ships, and then Shanghai's fucking massive navy. I guess it was like the caravel was like this big, and this is like the fucking Shanghai ship, a little tiny dot. Basically, it was huge, right? It was like 3-4 stories big, tremendous navy, right? China was like the biggest empire at this time. So Shanghai goes from China, which was known as Katai back then. The Europeans called it Katai. Marco Polo spent time over there. Got abducted by Mongol shit. Became part of their court, entertainment for the court. How powerful the Eastern empires were. Right? They fucking abducted Marco Polo, and you're gonna become a little bitch, basically. That's basically what they made Marco Polo in. And then they would return him back. It's like, get out of here, man. And he came back with his book, Travels. And people were like, holy shit, Marco Polo, racist, and there's all this fucking badass shit over here. And that's when it became, right, people wanted to go to the east, right, to India, right, and to China, because there was all this fucking cool shit, like gunpowder, guns, right, were from there, and we brought them over here to Europe. Right? So anyway, Shanghai, right, big ass movie goes around from Cairo, from China. He goes out to the East Indies, right? So like the Philippines and Japan and all that area there, right? The China Sea. Goes around southern China and goes into India, basically just to show off, right? He would go in there and he would give a bunch of gifts to other people he would land at. Like, haha, look how powerful I am. Look at my fucking big ass ships, right? And we're not here to conquer you. We're just here to just pay us some taxes, and we'll leave you alone. And they did that, right? The fucking Chinese, powerful. So they went around and they were just showing off, right? And they went around down India to Ceylon. They went to the Strait of Hormuz, which is like Saudi Arabia, and to like Iran the peninsula is, the Arabian Peninsula. They went down south into like Africa, like towards where the Cape, the turn of what is it called, Somalia, into that little strait there. Went then back down to like basically towards like Madagascar. Basically, that was like the last spot. Basically, they turned back. They're like, we have enough. Fuck it. Like I think the rest of the Europeans know us, right? African people know us. Indians know us. We just want to show off and don't fuck with us. Right? They didn't go there to conquer them. Right? They just basically were like, we're here. You want to trade with us? That's fine. If you're not, that's cool too. Don't need you. Don't need you at all. But we're here. And that was the whole purpose of Shanghai's, I guess, travel around the world back then, right? The old world, the known world. He didn't go all the way to England, but he didn't need to. We knew about these people already, right? The Europeans. So that was our first, I guess, like world, like international, I guess, globalized effort, right, to come to bring power, consolidate power together. The Chinese, powerful empire. And then because of that, right, the Portuguese got the technology, right? They got the caravel, right? How to do the ships, right? They got inspired how to back ships, but they couldn't go long voyages, right? They couldn't go across seas and stuff. Now we saw the Chinese do it, picked up from their technology, I pretty much copied them. And the Portuguese were the first ones, well, the first ones, and they're the ones that really adapted that technology really well, ship sailing. And they call these ships the Caravels. Portuguese were the first, right, seafarers, European seafarers to go out to the sea. They also had the compass, right, and the quadrant navigation. So now you know you're not afraid to get lost out there and sea. Now you know where the fuck you're going. Okay, so the Portuguese, via the technology of the Chinese, that were out to explore the world, is Vasco Da Gama that first is able to go around the Good Hope, which is South Africa, and into India. Right? Before that, it was just Marco Polo. Right? There was only a land route, and that was dangerous as fuck. Right? Just like Marco Polo got abducted and was kidnapped for years, that same thing could happen to you. You could be killed. Right? There was a lot of like middlemen, basically, to go from like Spain from France or from England even all the way across the ocean. That's a long ways, y'all. Right, we're over here. Right, this is Spain. Right, this is over here. This is Norway, England. Pretty fucking little. That eventually will rule the whole fucking world. England, the English Empire. Right, you had to go through the land here. Land. All this fucking land. And in between all this land is Muslim people. You're Christian. They don't like you. You don't like them. Not a good deal, right? Sucks to go through all these people and have to pay taxes usually or protection somehow just to get some fucking pepper, right? Or some salt. That sucks, right? Well, not salt, some pepper. Right? We had salt back then. So it's land routes, right? So we're trying to circumvent those land routes, right, for our protection and to have a monopoly with the trade. And now we have so Vasco da Gama. So you know what? Now we have caravels. So we're in. It's upside down when I look at myself here. Where we're at here. Shit, I'm way the fuck out here. So Spain, Iberian Peninsula. That is a peninsula. Spain, Portugal, Iberia. So this is Portugal right here. And Sagres is a coastal city where the bus is from off. So it goes down. He goes down south, right? The Caravel, and he goes down the coast of Africa. And he just, sets up. He goes there, down. He goes around South Africa, and boom, he gets like some wind currents. Takes him all the way to India. Highlight cut. And then we reach you a diary journey, a journey entry from one of the shipmates from Vasco da Gama. Where the fuck did I leave that? Oh, right here. That's not it. So the title is 1498. And Europeans are exploring. Vasco de Gama hits India, and I just want to highlight like how backwards, how underdeveloped Europeans were. Right, so we're trying to get to India, right? Because that's where the good stuff is at. Right? And I'm not gonna read the whole fucking thing. I'm just gonna read one section. So they're the Indians, the Mughals. They came, and when they saw the present, they laughed at it. So Vasco de Gama was trying to, diplomatic. We don't know their language. Some translation issues there. So to find out that we're not gonna there to attack them, let's bring some gifts. Here's a gift. Come in peace. Here's a gift. So when they saw the present, right, the gift, they laughed at it, saying that it was not a thing to offer to a king. But the poorest merchant from Mecca or any part of India gave more, and that if you wanted to make a present, it should be in gold, as the king would not accept such things. Right, so these people, right, these Vasco da Gama, right, is exploring the rest of the world, and he gets there, and they're laughing at him. It's like, yo, what the fuck you guys got here, man? Like, we don't want to trade with you. This is fucking, what the fuck is this? I'm not sure what it is. I don't have time to go into it, but I wonder what it was, right? It wasn't gold, right? It wasn't nothing worthy. Even the poorest merchant of Mecca would give more to the king. So they were denied access to the king for the first couple of days, right? Later on, the Vasco da Gama was able to talk to the king and set up trading relations, trade networks. Right? So now we don't have to go through the middle, through the roads, through the land routes. Now we could go around Africa and go straight to the jackpot, India, China. So there's the Portuguese. And then so the Portuguese have a fucking monopoly on this now. Right? They also have guns, right? And so I told you that gunpowder and guns come from China. The Europeans were very, very smart, and they modified the guns. So now the Europeans have guns that are better than the ones that the Indians and the Chinese have. So it kind of like the next time the Portuguese come to Calicut, they're like, fuck your gifts, fool. How about a gift, motherfucker? And boom, just shoot them, or canyons from outside. So what the Portuguese do is that they set up a lot of trading, centers in these coastal cities throughout Africa, the west coast of Africa, in India. So all these like important little hubs where anybody, the Dutch, English, wants to go through there, they have to pay Portuguese. Right? So fuck for the rest of the other European powers, right? Right now the Portuguese are on top of the world. Europeanly speaking, right? Because they control these very unique gateways into the economies, to the world market of India and China. Because they have such good, better ships, the Caravels, which they got from the Chinese, and such really good weapons. All Europeans had at this time really good weapons now. So they were the first ones to really use canyons and stuff to control these hubs, right? These gateways. And this is where Columbus comes in, right? Christopher Columbus, right? And so now we can't go to the land routes; those are dangerous, right? And he's like, "The world is round. We know the world is round." Right? He's smart back then. He knows the world is round. So he was like, "It makes sense. The world is round. It's a ball. Instead of going down to reach the other part of the world, what if I go that way? I have to hit India, right? It makes fucking sense." And he wasn't smart enough with math, though. He made some calculations. I don't know what the fuck he got some calculations from, but he made the calculations. He's like, oh shit, it's not that bad. In 2 months' time, I should be in India. Other people were like, dude, you're dumb, man. Your math is wrong. Other sailors and explorers were like, yo, no, the world is much bigger than that. So that's where Columbus messed up. Not that he thought that the world was flat. Right? He knew the world was round, but he underestimated the size of the globe. It was way, way bigger. In fact, like double the size that he expected to be. So he was the first one. He was adamant. He was like, no, I got my math right. Everybody else is wrong. I'm gonna go for it. So he tried to sell this to very different empires and companies, corporations back then. Right? They were doing the explorations, right? They were funding explorations for these explorers. Vasco de Gama, right, it was working for the Portuguese king, and then there was all these corporations that pop up. Anyways, Columbus goes where he's from, Geneva, and these people are like, nah, dude, your math is wrong. I'm not gonna fund you for that. That's crazy. So he goes around, right, in Europe, trying to sell his project, his idea of, no, just go around, let's not go to the south and deal with the Portuguese. We could find our own route, new route towards India. And so that's happening, right, with Columbus. And what's also happening in the old world at the same time is that in Spain, in the Iberian Peninsula, the Muslims are in control. They control the whole thing. Been controlling that whole fucking area since 700 CE. And it was not until like the 1300s, 1400s, and then in 1492, we call that Reconquista, reconquest of the Iberian Peninsula away from the Moors. So these are North African Muslims, and back into the Christian Europeans. And this happened because the consolidation of two very powerful kingdoms in Spain, the Kingdom of Aragon and the Kingdom of Castile. So Ferdinand and Isabella got married. They were cousins, mind you, they were cousins. But whatever. Right? They got married, right? And they consolidated power. Right? So now they're unified. Right? This whole unified front, powerful enough to reconquer the rest of the Iberian Peninsula, away from the Moors, the Muslims. That happens. So there's a powerful country here, and and they're ambitious, right? These Catholic kings, as they're called, right? Because they're the banner of Catholicism. They reconquer Iberia, and they have the blessing of the Pope. Right? The Pope is on their side, and they want to beat the Portuguese. Right? The Portuguese is their main rival. It's right there in the Iberian Peninsula. I'll show you the Iberian Peninsula. If I have a fucking map here. This is the Iberian Peninsula. Most of it is Spain. A little slither of land in Portugal. Right? And Portugal has way more money right now because they control these gateways into India. So these kings, right, these Catholic kings are like, fuck, we gotta find a way to like beat the Portuguese. We're not gonna pay taxes for them. Fuck them. So lo and behold, here comes fucking Columbus with this crazy ass idea. Oh, I have an idea. It's all around the other side of the world. We get to India. They're like, you know what? Fuck. Let's take a fucking chance with this guy. Fucking crazy Columbus. Loco Colon. And they go for them. And they fucking they sponsor him, basically. And that's how Columbus was able to get, right, the La Niña, La Pinta, La Santa Maria, right, funded by these Catholic kings from Spain, even though he's Italian, right, from Geneva. And he sails across the ocean blue, right? Changes fucking history forever. So it's 1492. Right, here comes Columbus. Right, got sea and stuff. He makes it right in October 12th. Just past right, October 12th, just past midnight. One of his shipmates, right? It wasn't him. He takes the credit afterwards when he publishes his diaries. Diaries of his. They're fucked up and brutal Native Americans. But anyways, it's like, yo, there's a fucking bird that's like a land bird, right? Like a bird has to hit land somehow. Let's fucking follow that fucking bird. So they fucking find land, and they hit Hispaniola. They hit a Caribbean island, not Hispaniola first. They hit some kind of Caribbean island out there in the Caribbeans. Wailing Island, what it's called now. And whoa, we reached it. We've accomplished our fucking goal. We're in India. Spices, here we come. And they get there and they're like, nah, something's off here. No, this is not fucking India. Like, where the fuck is India? Like, what is the great civilizations? Where the great markets at? And they first reached with these Indians, Native Americans. So they first hit the Bahamas, right? This Wailing Island. Then they go into Hispaniola, bigger island. This is fucking India now. Not right. He's in fucking. It's present day Haiti, Dominican Republic. Hispaniola. He's there. He swears he's in fucking India now. Yeah, I made it. fucking kings are gonna be so fucking happy, become a rich man, whatever, blah blah blah. And then he goes into Cuba, right, into all these other islands, right, and he's like, no, something's off, but he's still thinking he's fucking India, right? As a matter of fact, Columbus dies thinking he fucking reached India. Poor dude. But he reached a whole fucking new continent, a whole new world. Right? Yeah, so he reaches fucking India, and he reaches the Tainos, the Taino Indians, and they're super cool, man. They're super peaceful. They're like, they give him fucking gifts. Right? They're impressed by this guy. They never seen big ass ships, the Caravels, before. These people had little canoes, right? And they see a big ass ship, right? And they're wearing fucking armor and weapons and glass. Never seen a fucking bottle. I don't have a bottle of glass. Wish I did. Glass, right? They have glass. They're fucking amazed by all this, and it shines, right? Glass, right? Glasses are shining screen. Indians are just like, what the fuck is this? They're amazed by this stuff. Absolutely just amazed as Indians, right? And vice versa, Columbus and his crew, they noticed that these people give them gold. Right? And that these people are wearing gold necklaces and shit and jewelry. Like, holy shit. Right? And they try harder, right? They cannot really talk to each other, so they're gesturing. And they're like, yo, give me your fucking gold, and I'll give you the beautiful glass bottle. Wow, right? It shines just like gold does, right? It's a fair trade. Of course it's not, right? Because gold, now we know, is way. Would you trade, right, a empty Coca-Cola bottle for a pendant of gold? Of course not, right? That's stupid, basically, right? It would be stupid if you gave yourself your gold up for a glass bottle. But for these Indians that never seen glass before, or like metal, right, pots and pans, fucking amazed, right? They've seen gold before, that's cool, whatever, we know what that shit's at. But these new stuff, right, this shiny new stuff, what the fuck is that? So they value that a whole lot more than what they have already, right? You know, it's new, right? When something's new, when you get a new toy, it's like the coolest thing ever. And then after a while, it just, I don't know, fuck it. You know, after you get a newer toy, or you get a new phone, a new iPhone, and you have a super old, the oldest I think iPhone there is, all cracked, right? And you get a new one, you feel like the shit, right? The same thing here, right? The same psychological things happening here. They didn't read you what Christopher Columbus himself said in his letter to the kings, Ferdinand and Isabella. It was dated 1493. So in his letter back to the kings, he tells them, I'm not going to read you the whole letter, he tells them, none of them, and them here is referring to the Indians, the Taino Indians, none of them are possessed of any iron, neither have they weapons, being unacquainted with, and indeed incompetent to use them. Not from any deformity of body, for they are well formed, because they are timid and full of fear. And then he goes on. They also gave objects of great value for trifles. Thus they barter like idiots, cotton and gold for fragments of bows, glasses, bottles, and jars. Right, so these guys were idiots, right? That was the first impression Columbus gets from these people. Fucking idiots. And basically the rest is history, right? Right? We find out they have gold, right? And what he does, Columbus, is like he pretty much captures and ransoms the whole fucking Taino Indians and tells them, if you don't give me gold, I'm gonna cut your leg off, your ankle off. Right? If you don't bring me X amount of gold. And like, yo, the gold is not in this island. It's in Central America. We're not gonna give you all that gold. We don't have it to begin with. And he cuts off a lot of people's. Yeah, it's the massacre, basically what happens. Genocide. As a matter of fact, it's a really good book here that I'll bring your attention to called American Holocaust. And it's by David E. Stannard, a professor at he's a Hawaii. I don't know if he's still there anymore. I think he moved up. This is a really good book here. So once you write a really good book, right, not only would you be famous, but you get promoted right up the ladder in academia. It's called the American Holocaust. It's the conquest of the New World. Trigger warning. Super, super, super brutal and violent and graphic book. It's based on true stories, on the people's own accounts, who are doing their own atrocities here. Right? But let me read you a little like excerpt of what these eyewitnesses of these were happening. This is for the Spaniards now, right? Which was Columbus, right under this. The Spaniards took babies from their mother's breast, grabbing them by the feet and smashing their. They built a long gibbet, low enough for the toes to touch the ground to prevent strangling, and hanged 13 natives at a time in honor of Christ our Savior and the 12 apostles. The straw was wrapped around their torn bodies, and they were burned alive. Here's a drawing of the guy who wrote this, right? This is the primary source here. It is a graphic, a drawing of what's going on here. So there's like the Indians being hanged, not really, where they could like touch the toes, where they could pick up to still be alive, and then there's being burned alive. This is the kind of shit we did to these people. Right? And they welcomed the Europeans with fucking gifts. American Holocaust. Really good book here. All right. So that's what's going on, right? So the Spaniards are just, I mean, that's what they called conquistadores, because of the Reconquista. Right? So after Columbus opened up this whole new world, there was a rush of conquistadores, basically veterans from the wars with the Mughal Empire, right? Not the Mughal Empire, I'm sorry, with the Moors, with the Muslims. So they fought, right? Veterans, they come back to Spain, and they're expecting glory and riches. I mean, most of them don't get it, right? Not enough land in Europe. What they claim for. So a lot of these pirates, right, these low-ranking members that fought so hard against the Moors, they're like, wow, we just found a new world. Let's go conquer that, right? They come, the conquistadores are the ones that come up from having just conquered the Moors. These people are pumped up, right? We're fucking warriors, right? So, I mean, there are atrocities that are going to happen. Tremendous atrocities. By 1493, the following year that Columbus hits the New World, right? More than 17 ships hit the New World. 1,000 men are sent to explore. Right? This is under under the Spanish. In 1502, you have Nicolás de Ovando with about 2,500 men. So just increasingly more and more conquistadors come into the New World. Excuse me. Of the Indians here. You have Amerigo Vespucci in 1499 and 1502. He comes. He's the one that he's like, you know what, guys? This is not India. It's a whole new fucking continent. So that's what we called it, America, right? This continent, because of Amerigo Vespucci being explored. Then you have John Cabot. Right? He goes. He's a merchant from England. Right? He goes to Newfoundland, up in way in the north, up there in 1497. You have Pedro Cabral in 1500. Founds Brazil for the Portuguese. Right? So now you have all these like a rush, a symbol for the New World. So the Spaniards have the Caribbean and Mesoamerica, and parts of North America, the Southwest and Florida. And then you have John Cabot for the English, claiming North America, Newfoundland, Maine, Newfoundland, all that area up there towards Canada. Then you have Pedro Cabral claiming for Portuguese down south in Brazil. All these people, all these Europeans, all of a sudden, just reclaim the land here. Within a couple of few generations, right, we pretty much overtake the entire New World. It's a mixture between intense warfare, better weapons. Right? These people don't have weapons. I mean, they have the something like that. It's called. Basically, it's made out of obsidian. Right? So that's the sharpest thing we have here. It's obsidian points, and it's like a big mallet. It's like a big piece of wood, and in the wood there's like shards of obsidian. I mean, it's powerful, but like it up close. You don't have gunpowder. You don't have guns. You have shields that are made out of iron, that are made out of wood, right? So even though that the Europeans are outnumbered, they have gunpowder and guns. Big advantage. And then secondly, there's smallpox, right? This is what we call the Colombian Exchange, right? This biological exchange of people and plants and animals and diseases and viruses that, for thousands of years have never met before, and now clashing together. So, Europeans have developed, immunity, right, resistance for diseases like smallpox, right? And the Native Americans have not. So that decimated Native Americans. Smallpox, among other epidemics as well. But smallpox was the main killer, especially for the Aztecs, for the Mexicas. And if you want to read about like the Mexica perspective of the conquest of their own empire, this book called The Broken Spears, Aztec account of the conquest of Mexico by Miguel León Portilla. He's already passed away, but he's like the preeminent scholar of Aztec history and philosophy and everything. And let me just read you really quick here. This is an Aztec accounting, right? What happened when Tenochtitlan was taken over by Cortés, his conquistadores. Broken spears lie on the roads. We have torn our hair in our grief. The houses are roofless now, and their walls are red with blood. Worms are swarming in the streets and plazas, and the walls are splattered with gore. The water has turned red as if we'd died, and when we drink it, it has a taste of brine. We have pounded our hands in despair against the adobe walls. For our inheritance, our city is lost and dead. The shields of our warriors were as defense, but they could not save it. We have chewed dried twigs and salt grasses. We have filled our mouths with dust and bits of adobe. We have eaten lizards, rats, and worms. So from one of the biggest empires of this area to that, in a matter of a couple of generations, right? Not even one. It was Cortés, right? One expedition by Cortés completely just decimated one of the biggest empires of the Mesoamerica. Right? You can just imagine the kind of trauma these people must have felt. Overall, all told, right, with this Colombian exchange, right? So not just like diseases were exchanged, right? Also, sheep, cattle, right? It also decimated the Native American way of life. Back then, we didn't have big cattle, right, like cows. Not because we had brought cows over, we had to clear out land, Native American land, so that we could raise cattle for our own European diets. Right? So it wasn't just smallpox and warfare that decimated the Native American way of life. It was also diets, the way we eat. Right? All right. So yeah. So overall, all told, about 80 million people, about 1/5 of humankind, they were called the Great Dying history. 80 million people died in the first century and a half after European contact. That's what we call the Great Dying. And it was a mixture of this, right? Of smallpox, warfare, big warfare against Native American land and tribes, and technological advance. Right? All right, so now we killed off the Europeans. We killed off the Native Americans, and it's time to govern Spanish America. Right? Now it's become Spanish America. How do we govern this? Right, so there's the king on top, of course, the king of Spain. By this time, it's Carlos V, Charles V, Habsburg dynasty, and you have the Council of the Indies. Right? These are appointed citizens. You have the Council of the Indies as the main body of Spanish colonial governance, and then which says like it's broken down into viceroys, and I guess like sub viceroys and local officials. So viceroys are like governors. You got like different viceroys. You have like a couple of them. The main one is in Mexico City, and and that is circulated to Metropole, Spain, right? Madrid. And this is the Council of the Indies. We have the Council of the Indies, broken down like that. And another important body of governance is the Catholic Church. So the separation of church and state existed here. They both work in parallel to dominate and conquer Native Americans. Especially the Catholic Church, because we're in charge mostly of, especially of the treatment of Indians. Right? And most Catholic treated Indians for Las Casas. So I should probably talk about Las Casas. It's one of your primary sources within Mexico. Las Casas writes condemnation of how Spaniards are treating Indians, basically like slaves. This is the devastation of the Indies. First of all, it starts off like how cool the Indies were, like how nice the Taino Indians were, how welcoming they were, how noble they were. And then it talks about how we destroyed them, right? With smallpox, with warfare, etc. And then he ends this book by saying that we should, instead of using Indian slavery, Indians as slaves in these mines and these plantations for these conquistadors, we should import Africans. Because they're, first of all, Africans, they're used to smallpox, they're immune to all these diseases that Europeans are, strong, used to work in the plantations already, sugar plantations, and there's already a thriving slave trade in Africa. But we should go with them, right? So that's Las Casas, right? You know, not the of man, right? It's tit for right? Let's not slave Indians. Indians are nice, they're humans. But Africans, though, yeah, fuck Africans. Let's bring them over for slaves, right? That's Bartolomé Las Casas in a nutshell. All right. So the first plantation came in 1502 into the New World, and this was a fellow Portuguese president in the Azores and in Madeira, these islands off of the Iberian Peninsula. It was the first sugar plantations in the world. And so the Portuguese, I told you, went around controlling coastal cities around Africa. They would build these things called factories, fatoeiras, Portuguese. These fatoeiras were pretty much like slave depots. Right? So chieftains from Africa would raid in the interior of Africa, whether through warfare or just straight up just slave raiding. And they would take these slaves, African slaves, these are African people, in themselves, fighting each other. And then when one loses, they're enslaved, the loser. And then they take them to the coast to go sell them off to the Portuguese. Right? So you have these depots, right? These factories, right? These basically a factory that held human bodies, these African, awaiting being shipped out across the ocean for the Portuguese first. Well, first they went off into the Madeiras, islands in the Azores, and then they were, they got sugar right, from India, from over there, from spices, and they were like, we could grow this over here. And these islands are perfect to grow these things. So Madeira is an island. It was woodlands. Right? That's the way they got the name Madeira. Madeira, Portuguese for wood. And they decimated the island. They just cleared it to create plantations for sugarcane, because demand for sugar was so fucking high in Europe. Right? Literally, made people high. That's what kids love candy, right? Because it makes them fucking high. So they're like, the Portuguese were like, fuck yeah, let's make fucking plantations. Banking money. So they move out to the New World, and they're like, holy shit, it's even more fertile than what Madeira and Azores has to offer. Let's move that plantation system to the New World, right? And they first tried it out with Indians, but Indians died off so quickly that they couldn't keep up. Right? They decimated the whole Indians through forced labor, right? Then we have two systems of forced labor, right? The plantations and the mines. Right? The Spaniards also found out that the Americas, especially Mexico, right? Zacatecas, San Luis Potosí, and then south in Peru, I forgot the name of the fucking city. It's not Cusco. It's a small town. Silver, abundance of silver, like a fuck ton of silver. We're still mining silver down there to this day. That's how much fucking silver was there. And they're like, holy shit, jackpot. And mining back then was not how it is today, right? You had to do it by hand. Fuck this shit by hand. Dangerous. So they forced Indians to do this. The Mita system is what it's called, MITA, the Mita system. Forced labor, basically. And I'm not going to get into that. I mean, in the plantations, in the haciendas, you have the encomienda system. Right? Basically, the encomienda system is that the Spanish king would allot to give conquistadors, for part of the service, land. And this land came with Indians there. Indians had lived in this land before. It was not virgin land. Tribes and clans and nations had lived in this land before. But if you're given that land, those Indians were part of that land. So you could do with them whatever you want with them. So that's the encomienda system. All right. And that brings me to the next topic, right? Society. And so this is the governance of Spain, colonial Spain. Now the society in colonial Spain. You have the Peninsulares. The Peninsulares that come from the peninsula of Iberia. They were born in Spain, Portuguese, or whatever, in the Iberian Peninsula. And underneath them, they're the top of the top. And underneath them, you have all kinds of mestizos. Right? This mixed breed, right, of races between. Underneath them, on top of Peninsulares, you had the criollos. They were half Spanish. They were Spanish. Their parents were Spanish, but they themselves were born in the New World. So they were not really Peninsulares, not fully blooded, right? Like top, but they were there almost, right? And then below them, the mestizos, and you had all kinds of mestizos, right? You have the Indian and the Spanish. That was a mestizo. You have the coyote, which is like the slave and the Indian, right? You have all kinds of different. There was a case system, and it was the law, a super category, all these shades of brown, basically, and black. Whereas in England, right, later on, it was just black and white. There was no mestizaje, per se, especially in the legal code. In the Spanish legal code, there was these particular categories. This hybrid culture arose, and it was codified in the legal laws of Spanish colonial America. All right. So, right. So there's that council of the Indies, right? And you have these two big empires at this time right now: Portugal, Spain, looking it out to see who controls the New World. And these both they're Catholics. They're under the Catholic religion, Pope, right? The Vatican. They're like, yo guys, we gotta make a fucking deal here. Stop your. First of all, we gotta unify ourselves, right? Crusades are happening too at the same time, right? So there's that going on, and we gotta unite ourselves as Catholics. We're fucking bickering between you two. The Pope, first, 1493, is a papal bull. It's just like a law that the Pope gives out back then that became law, like international law. So the origins of international law come here, right? With the Vatican, how much power the fucking Pope had over these kings. They had permission for the Pope, basically, to do what the fuck they're doing over there in the New World. So the Pope was like, yo, guys, stop your bickering. We'll break up the New World in half. We'll break up the whole world in half, actually, right? And this is called the Papal Bull, the Intercaetera Papal Bull, which will later become more codified in this international law as the Treaty of Tordesillas. The Treaty of Tordesillas of 1496 was signed in Tordesillas. So the Treaty of Tordesillas basically just splits the world in two. And I forgot the name of the exact number of the 45 degree, I guess that's what it is. Right here, this line right here. Anything besides this line, I can't see it. So this is Brazil right here. And right here there's a line, 45 degree. Anything, what is it, east of this, goes into Africa and Europe and India and China. That's going to be Portuguese stuff. That's Portuguese domain. Don't fuck with that area, Eurasia, right? The Portuguese have Spain. Leave that alone for the Portuguese. From Brazil, 45-degree, I guess latitude, this way, east. 45-degree latitude westward, which would include it's North America. That's Spanish stuff. South America, Central America, that's Spain too. So keep in mind, like this brings me to another point, right? Most of South America is east of Michigan. That's kind of how they broke it off, right? So from Brazil eastward, that's Portuguese stuff. And then from Brazil westward, that's all Spanish stuff. Treaty of Tordesillas. Split the world in two between these Catholic kings, right? These Catholic dynasties or empires. And this is Pope Alexander VI. So there's the non-Christian world and then the Christian world. And this is one of the justifications used for conquest. The Pope gave us permission. You gotta be you're under the domain of the Pope now. So and the Indians were like, they will see the cross and what is that? It's pretty. It's not Mother Earth. It's not Tucachila. It's not it's not Quetzalcoatl. Sure. But why am I gonna revere this? So, and the Europeans were like, no, we have to convert you guys. That's part of the treaty. We could get this land, right? The land is ours, but part of the deal is that we have to convert people towards Catholicism to give more people towards God and towards the Pope. Right? So that's one of the justifications. Conversion. Another justification for the conquest of New Spain is, these guys are backwards, right? They need civilization. They need us. Which I just showed you. These guys don't need them. Right? They had their own complex civilizations, but that was one of the main reasons or justifications. All right. So this is this weird mixture of like religion and glory, right? All right. So. All right. So the Pope is its control. Right? Catholicism is really what controls like the European world until this dude Martin Luther comes around and he writes the 95 Theses. He staples them on this German town. I forgot the name of the German town, and it's basically a critique of the Pope, saying that the Pope is a corrupt institution. Catholicism is a corrupt institution. Is right away. It's going away from the true word of God, and it's all it cares about is conquest and money. It's kind of true, very true. One of the main critiques that, for example, Martin Luther brings against the Catholic Church is the use of tithes and indulgences. So a tithe is like a tax that the Catholic Church would charge everybody. That's one of the reasons why the Catholic Church, the Pope, was so fucking powerful, because they taxed in Europe. Right? You had to pay the tax, or the Pope would kill you, basically. And then the indulgences, right? So you can't sin, right? It's Catholicism, right? It's all sin, right? If you're Catholic, right? You're pretty much when you go to sermon to a church, they scare the shit out of you from sinning, right? You have to confess when you sin too to a random fucking stranger too. So whatever, right? Sinning is like the main fucking thing, Catholicism. But indulgences was a caveat, was like a loophole. So if you had money, you could give some money to the priest. Like, hey, wait, I fucked up, I sinned. Here's money, and you'll be absolved from sinning for your sins. So this was totally right against the poor people, right? The poor people were like pretty much damned to damnation. Whereas if you're rich, you could just pay yourself off and go into heaven. In theory, there indulgences. Martin Luther was like, "What the fuck is this? Right? This is how corrupt the Catholic Church is." So this is what began the Protestant Reformation, right? Protestant, right? Protest, test Pope, the power of the Pope in the Catholic Church, and we're reforming Reformation. Reforming, right? We're reforming, right? The form of religion, the form of the Christian religion. We're going to reform it into a more purified religion, it's closer to the work and to the Word of God. And this is the Protestant Reformation. And this swept Europe like a goddamn wildfire. And it kind of forced Spain to, how can I say it, to reform itself, right? It kind of forced Spain to not really, how can I say it? It put Spain and like the rest, it put Spain, the Catholic ones, and then the other non-Catholic Christian European powers against each other, basically. The Reformation, this Protestant Reformation. So from then on, what is it? 1517, right? All the way to this day, I would argue, right, there's a big beef between Catholicism and Protestantism. And that ushered in hundreds and hundreds of years of fucking religious wars against Europe. European became engulfed with this debate between what is the true religion. Is it Catholicism or is it Protestantism? And I mean, it was bloody debates here, man. Like, whole fucking wars were launched between Catholics and Protestants in the same country. Perfect example is England. England versus France, who was Catholic, and then England versus England themselves, right? Huguenots, French Catholics, and the Protestant French, and it was just a fucking mess that this created. What was the line? Salvation. Who is the right one? Who's going to have the justification also? Like, who's going to have God on their back? Right? So there was a lot on their line here, right? These religious wars were just plaguing Europeans. And this is another reason why a lot of people migrated from Europe towards the New World. Right? Think about the Puritans. Right? Why are they called Puritans? And I'm going to hit to chapter 2 now. The Puritans are called Puritans because they were trying to purify the Church of England, which was already reformed. They were trying to reform. Yeah, so yes, there's all these religious stuff happening in England stuff, right? And like I said, it creates this schism between England and the Catholic empires, right? Spain and England, primarily, at this point in time, become the worst of enemies, and these two empires are some of the strongest ones that are going out towards the world and are really making progress on controlling vast amounts of the world. Right? So these imperial wars, it's about land and conquest, but underneath it, underwritten by all of it, is also religious reformation happening. So it's fucking things happening here. And this gives way to the so-called Black Legend of Spanish colonialism. Right? So in order to fight against, to compete with the Spanish colonialists, conquistadors, who already had, I guess like a first start, right? They're already ahead of the game. The English didn't come into like New World late in the game. The Spanish already had the concept of the Indies. They already had established missions and stuff like that, and presidios. The English came and they were like, "Oh man, there's a border here with England. There's very good land where these Spanish people are at. We want." So this created, right, these imperial wars were not just in England or in the old world. They also spilled over in the New World. And then you have the Native Americans in the middle of all this. Okay. And so we have the Black Legend, right? So in order to compete with Spanish colonization efforts, the English created the Black Legend. It's a propaganda effort claiming that the Spanish were so uniquely brutal against the Native Americans that is one reason why the English were justified in coming into the New World and conquering Spanish holdings, because we need to save the Indians from the brutality of the Spanish and show them the freedom of English liberties. But that was it was propaganda. I mean, don't get it twisted. Both English colonizers and Spanish colonizers were equally as brutal. this black legend really became really popular and was really used like the main justification of why England should go into the New World and defy the Treaty of Tordesillas and conquer not just the New World, but also conquer and off the Spanish in the New World, Florida, for example, which we'll see in chapter 2. All right, so there was like a rush now, right, to explore and claim North America. Right? So now we have the Spanish and the English rushing to lay claim to North America. Right? So we have a battle for Spain and a battle for, really a battle for Spain. And you have not just England and Spanish, but also the French there too. Right? So this is an imperial borderlands here. Right? The New World comes this imperial war game happening, all at the expense of Native Americans. And I guess I'll leave it like that. I mean, I could go on and on forever with this shit. Seriously. Again, just make sure you read your textbook, chapter 1. I'm gonna pick up really when Europeans begin to colonize, like permanently begin to settle the New World. And this is kind of like the end of chapter 1 in the Fawner book. But I'm gonna mix it with chapter 2 together for the next lecture. So expect the next lecture hopefully by tomorrow or so, in the next couple of days. And stay safe and stay home most you can, because this pandemic is pretty real. And I hope you enjoy this. Stop this.